How far would someone go to control your future, your body, and your money without you ever suspecting? When I overheard my surgeon whispering about a secret envelope for my wife during my vasectomy, I realized I was the last to understand the truth. What I discovered inside changed everything, and it's how I turned the tables on the wife and doctor who thought I was just their pawn. The conversation started innocently enough in our living room on a Tuesday evening. Tara was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone while I reviewed some electrical schematics for work. Our son Benji was upstairs doing homework, the house peaceful except for the soft hum of the dishwasher. "Elliot," Tara said, not looking up from her screen, "I've been thinking about us getting more serious about family planning." I glanced up from my papers. At 39, I thought we were past the family planning stage. Benji was 10, and we'd never really discussed having more children. "What do you mean?" She finally looked at me, her expression carefully neutral. "I think you should get a vasectomy." The words hung in the air like smoke. I set down my pen, giving her my full attention. "That's pretty permanent, Tara. Where's this coming from?" She shifted on the couch, adopting that patient tone she used when she thought I was being slow to understand something obvious. "Look at our finances, Elliot. We're finally in a good place. You got that promotion? I'm doing well at the corporate office. But another child? The daycare costs alone would set us back years, not to mention college funds, medical expenses." She pulled up what looked like a spreadsheet on her phone. I ran the numbers. Over 18 years, we're talking about $250,000 minimum. That's money we could put toward Benji's future or our retirement. I had to admit her logic was sound. Tara had always been the practical one in our relationship, the one who managed our budget and kept us on track financially. Still, something about the conversation felt rushed. "Can we think about this for a while? It's a big decision." "Of course," she said, but I caught a flash of irritation in her eyes. "I just think the sooner we handle it, the sooner we can really focus on building our future." Over the next few weeks, Tara brought up the vasectomy regularly. She'd mention it while we were having coffee in the morning, or during dinner conversations. She started leaving printouts about the procedure on my desk, articles about how simple and safe it was, testimonials from other men who'd had it done. "Look at this," she'd say, showing me her phone. "The Hendersons just had their third kid. Linda told me they're already struggling with the mortgage payments." Or, "Did you see that study about family size and financial stress? Couples with more than one child report significantly higher anxiety levels." Her friend Cynthia became a frequent visitor during this period, and I noticed how their conversations always seemed to steer toward the topic of family planning. They'd sit at our kitchen table, speaking in low voices about being responsible and thinking ahead. "You're so lucky to have a husband who's willing to consider the practical side of things," Cynthia told Tara one afternoon, loud enough for me to hear from the living room. "Some men are too stubborn about these things." The pressure was subtle but constant. Tara never demanded or threatened. She was too smart for that. Instead, she made me feel like the vasectomy was the obvious, mature choice, and that any hesitation on my part was selfish or short-sighted. My father Will tried to offer some perspective when I mentioned it during one of our weekend visits. "Son," he said carefully, "that's a decision that should come from both of you equally. Make sure you're not being pushed into something you're not ready for." But Tara's arguments made sense. We were financially stable for the first time in years. Another child would complicate everything, and the procedure itself was routine. Thousands of men got vasectomies every year without complications. Finally, after 3 weeks of gentle but persistent persuasion, I agreed. "I'll call Dr. Harman's office tomorrow," I told her. Tara's smile was radiant. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "You're making the right choice for our family, Elliot. I'm proud of you for thinking ahead like this." Dr. Felix Harman had been recommended by Tara's colleague at work. He was well regarded in town, with a practice that specialized in men's health. When I called to schedule the consultation, his receptionist was efficient and professional. Dr. Harman can see you next Tuesday at 2 o'clock, she said. The consultation usually takes about 30 minutes, and if you decide to proceed, we can schedule the procedure for the following week. The consultation went smoothly. Dr. Harman was a distinguished man in his early 50s, with graying temples and a confident demeanor. He explained the procedure in detail, answered all my questions, and assured me that complications were extremely rare. It's a 20-minute procedure, he said. Local anesthesia, minimal discomfort. You'll be back to normal activities within a few days. What struck me as slightly odd was how familiar he seemed to be with my situation. He mentioned details about our family finances and Tara's job that I didn't remember sharing. When I asked how he knew those details, he said Tara had called ahead to provide background information. Your wife is very thorough, he said with a smile. She wants to make sure you have all the support you need for this decision. I scheduled the procedure for the following Thursday morning. Tara took the day off work to drive me to the clinic, which I appreciated. She seemed more nervous than I was, checking and double-checking the appointment time and asking repeatedly if I had followed all the pre-procedure instructions. You're sure you haven't taken any aspirin in the last week? She asked for the third time as we pulled into the clinic parking lot. I'm sure, Tara. I followed the instructions exactly. She squeezed my hand. I know this isn't easy, but we're doing the right thing for our future. The clinic was modern and clean, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture in the waiting area. The staff was professional and courteous. A nurse named Maggie called my name after about 10 minutes. Mr. Rainer, Dr. Harman is ready for you. As I followed her down the hallway, I noticed Tara having what looked like an intense conversation with the receptionist. They were speaking in low voices, and both glanced in my direction. When Tara saw me looking, she waved and mouthed, "Good luck." The surgical suite was smaller than I'd expected, with bright overhead lights and gleaming medical equipment. Dr. Harman was already there, scrubbed and ready. Maggie helped me onto the table and began preparing the local anesthesia. Just a small pinch, Dr. Harman said as he administered the injection. You'll feel some pressure, but no pain. The anesthesia worked quickly. I could feel my lower body growing numb, and a pleasant drowsiness began to settle over me. Dr. Harman and Maggie worked efficiently, their movements practiced and confident. I was drifting in that twilight state between consciousness and sleep when I heard Dr. Harman's voice, quieter than before. Maggie, I need you to give his wife this envelope when we're finished. Don't let him see it. A chill ran through me despite the warm temperature in the room. I forced myself to remain still, to keep my breathing steady and my eyes closed. Every instinct told me to sit up and demand to know what was in that envelope, but something deeper, a survival instinct maybe, told me to stay quiet and listen. Are you sure about this, doctor? Maggie's voice was uncertain. It seems... Just follow the instructions, Dr. Harman said firmly. Mrs. Rainer was very specific about the timing. I heard the rustle of paper, the sound of something being sealed. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to remain motionless. The procedure continued around me, but all I could think about was that envelope and why Tara had given Dr. Harman specific instructions about it. The rest of the surgery passed in a blur. I was only vaguely aware of Dr. Harman finishing the procedure, of Maggie cleaning and bandaging the surgical site. When they were done, Dr. Harman spoke to me in his normal voice. Everything went perfectly, Elliot. You'll need to rest here for about 30 minutes. Then Maggie will take you to recovery. I mumbled something that I hoped sounded appropriately groggy. Dr. Harman left the room, and I heard him speaking to someone in the hallway. Tara's voice, I realized. Maggie stayed with me, checking my vital signs and making notes on my chart. When she stepped out momentarily, I cracked my eyes open just enough to see her hand a small white envelope to someone outside the door. My heart stopped. In the recovery room, I lay still and tried to piece together what I'd witnessed. The envelope, Dr. Harman's secretive tone, Tara's specific instructions, none of it made sense in the context of a routine medical procedure. I thought back to how the vasectomy conversation had started, how persistent Tara had been, how she'd managed every detail of the process. At the time, I'd attributed it to her naturally organized personality. Now I wondered if there was something more calculated behind her involvement. Maggie checked on me every few minutes, and I could see the concern in her eyes. When she thought I was still groggy from the anesthesia, she muttered something under her breath that sounded like, "This doesn't feel right." "How are you feeling, Mr. Rainer?" she asked when I finally woke up. "A little fuzzy, but okay," I said. "When can I see my wife?" "She's in the waiting room. I'll bring her back in a few minutes." When Tara entered the recovery room, she was all smiles and concern. She kissed my forehead and asked about my pain level, whether I needed anything. But I noticed how her eyes kept darting to Maggie and how she seemed to relax only after the nurse left us alone. "How do you feel?" she asked, taking my hand. "Tired. Ready to go home." "Dr. Harman said everything went perfectly. No complications at all." She paused, then added, "He mentioned there might be some paperwork to follow up on, but he'll handle all of that directly." Paperwork. Was that what was in the envelope? The drive home was quiet. Tara seemed lost in thought, occasionally glancing at her purse, which sat between us on the center console. I found myself staring at that purse, wondering if the mysterious envelope was inside. That evening, while I rested in bed, I heard Tara making phone calls downstairs. Her voice was too low for me to make out the words, but the tone was urgent, almost excited. When I called down to ask who she was talking to, she said it was just Cynthia, checking on how the procedure had gone. Over the next few days, as I recovered, I started paying closer attention to Tara's behavior. She was attentive and caring, bringing me meals in bed and making sure I followed Dr. Harman's post-operative instructions. But there was something different about her, a kind of energy, like she was anticipating something. I also noticed she was spending more time in her home office, which she usually used only for paying bills and handling household paperwork. When I asked what she was working on, she said she was organizing our financial documents. "Since you're going to be recovering for a few days, I thought I'd get our budget updated," she explained. "Maybe start planning for some of those investments we talked about." I didn't remember talking about any investments, but I let it slide. The pain medication was making me foggy, and I figured I might have forgotten. My father visited on Saturday, bringing soup from my stepmother and offering to help with anything around the house. We sat in my home office while Tara ran errands, and I found myself telling him about the strange conversation I'd overheard during surgery. An envelope? Will frowned. What kind of envelope? I don't know. But the doctor specifically told the nurse not to let me see it, and to give it to Tara. My father was quiet for a long moment. "Son, that doesn't sound like standard medical procedure." That's what I thought, but maybe it was just insurance paperwork or something. Maybe. But Will didn't look convinced. "Have you asked Tara about it?" "Not yet. I'm not even sure how to bring it up without sounding paranoid." Will leaned forward in his chair. "Elliot, I've been married for 40 years. When something feels off, it usually is. Trust your instincts." That afternoon, while Tara was at the grocery store, I decided to look around her office. I felt guilty about it. We'd always respected each other's privacy, but the nagging feeling about that envelope wouldn't go away. Her desk was neat and organized, with stacks of bills and financial statements arranged in labeled folders. I was about to give up when I noticed a folder marked Personal Private in the bottom drawer. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Bank statements for accounts I didn't know existed, printouts of emails between Tara and someone named F. Harman, and what looked like insurance paperwork with my name on it. My hands trembled as I read through the emails. They were brief and businesslike, but the content sent a sharp chill through me. "Payment confirmed. Procedure scheduled for Thursday as discussed. Documentation will be provided as agreed. Ensure patient remains unaware of additional arrangements. Final payment due upon completion. All records to be handled per our previous conversation. I heard Tara's car in the driveway and quickly put everything back exactly as I'd found it. My mind was racing as I made it back to the bedroom before she came inside. Additional arrangements? Final payment? What had I walked into? That evening, I called in sick to work for the rest of the week. I told Tara I was still experiencing more pain than expected, which wasn't entirely a lie, though the pain wasn't physical. While she was at her job, I drove to the neighborhood cafe where Cynthia often met her friends for lunch. I'd never particularly liked Cynthia. She was gossipy and had a tendency to insert herself into other people's business, but now I wondered if that tendency might work in my favor. I timed my arrival for when I knew she'd be there, and sure enough, she was sitting at a corner table with two other women I didn't recognize. "Elliot," she called out when she saw me. "How are you feeling? Tara said the procedure went really well." "Much better, thanks." I approached their table, trying to look casual. "Actually, I wanted to thank you for all your support during this whole process. Tara mentioned you helped her research everything." Cynthia beamed. "Oh, it was nothing. I just think it's so smart of you both to plan ahead like this, especially with everything Tara has been working toward." "Working toward?" "You know, her big plans. She's been so excited about finally being able to move forward with everything." Cynthia lowered her voice conspiratorially. "She told me she's been planning this for months. I think it's wonderful when couples can make these kinds of decisions together." Months. Tara had been planning this for months, but she'd only brought up the vasectomy 3 weeks ago. "Did she mention anything specific about the timeline?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just that everything had to happen in the right order. The procedure first, then the other stuff." Cynthia glanced around and leaned closer. "Between you and me, I think she's been a little stressed about keeping track of all the details. But she said once Thursday was over, everything would fall into place." I thanked Cynthia and left the cafe, my mind spinning. Everything would fall into place after Thursday, the day of my surgery. That afternoon, I called Maggie at Dr. Harman's office. I told the receptionist I had some questions about my recovery and asked if I could speak with the nurse who had assisted during my procedure. "Mr. Rainer?" Maggie's voice was cautious when she came to the phone. "Is everything all right? Are you experiencing any complications?" "No complications, but I wanted to ask you about something I thought I remembered from the surgery. I was pretty groggy, but I thought I heard Dr. Harman mention an envelope." There was a long pause. "Mr. Rainer, I think you should discuss any concerns with Dr. Harman directly." "I understand, but Maggie, if there was something I should know about that envelope, something that might affect my health or my family, would you tell me?" Another pause, longer this time. I'm not comfortable discussing this over the phone. But Mr. Rainer, if you have concerns about your procedure, you have every right to request copies of all your medical records." "All of them?" "All of them, including any documents that were prepared in connection with your surgery." She hung up before I could ask anything else, but her message was clear. There were documents, and I had a right to see them. That night, I waited until Tara was asleep before searching her purse. I felt like a criminal going through my own wife's belongings, but the pieces of this puzzle were too disturbing to ignore. The envelope was in a side pocket, sealed but not with the original medical tape. Tara had opened it and resealed it with a small piece of clear tape. Inside were 3 items that made my heart stop. First, a consent form for my vasectomy, but not the one I had signed. This version included additional language about irreversible sterilization procedures and waiver of future paternity rights. My signature had been forged at the bottom. Second, a notarized letter from Dr. Harman stating that I had voluntarily and permanently surrendered all reproductive capabilities, and that this decision was made with full knowledge and consent. The letter was dated 2 weeks before my surgery. Third, a cashier's check made out to Dr. Harman for $15,000, drawn from an account I'd never seen before. I sat in the darkness of our bathroom, staring at these documents, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just about preventing future pregnancies. This was about something much more sinister. The forged consent form and the notarized letter suggested that Tara needed legal documentation of my sterilization for some purpose. The $15,000 payment to Dr. Harman indicated that this was far from a routine medical procedure. I photographed each document with my phone, then carefully resealed the envelope and returned it to Tara's purse. The next morning, I called my old college friend Lance Whitaker, who now worked as an attorney in the city. I told him I needed legal advice about a personal matter and asked if we could meet as soon as possible. "How soon can you get here?" Lance asked after I'd explained the basics of the situation. "I'll leave now." Lance's law office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel. His secretary showed me into a conference room where Lance was waiting with a pot of coffee and a legal pad covered in notes. "Show me everything," he said without preamble. I laid out the photographs of the documents, along with printouts of the emails I'd found in Tara's office. Lance studied each item carefully, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. "Elliot," he said finally, "this is fraud, multiple kinds of fraud. The forged consent form alone is a felony. The payment to Dr. Harman suggests bribery or conspiracy, and depending on what Tara plans to do with that notarized letter, we might be looking at insurance fraud or worse." Worse? Think about it. Why would she need documented proof that you've been permanently sterilized? What situation would require that kind of evidence? I felt sick. Divorce proceedings? That's one possibility. If she's planning to file for divorce and claim that your inability to have children constitutes abandonment or breach of marital obligations, she might be able to secure a larger settlement. Lance pulled up some files on his laptop. There are cases where reproductive coercion has been used as grounds for enhanced alimony or asset division. If she can prove you made a unilateral decision that affected her reproductive future. But it was her idea. According to the documents she's created, it was your idea. Your forged signature, your voluntary consent, your decision to permanently alter your reproductive capacity without considering her wishes. The room felt like it was spinning. What can I do? First, we need more evidence. The documents you found are damning, but we need to establish a clear pattern of deception and fraud. Second, we need to figure out what her endgame is. Is this about divorce, insurance, something else entirely? Lance leaned back in his chair. Third, we need to be very careful about how we proceed. If Tara realizes you know about her scheme, she might accelerate whatever timeline she's working on. I spent the rest of the day at Lance's office going through every detail of the past few months. We created a timeline of Tara's behavior, mapped out the key players, and developed a strategy for gathering additional evidence. The nurse, Maggie, seems like she might be willing to help, Lance noted. Her discomfort with the situation suggests she knows something isn't right. How do I approach her without tipping off Dr. Harman? Very carefully. But Elliot, if she was involved in medical fraud, she could lose her license. That's powerful leverage. When I got home that evening, Tara was in her office again, door closed, speaking in low voices on the phone. I could hear fragments of her conversation through the thin walls. Confirmed yesterday, documentation is ready, should be able to move forward by next week. I knocked on the door. Honey, is everything okay? The conversation stopped abruptly. Just work stuff, she called back. I'll be out in a few minutes. But when she emerged 20 minutes later, she looked flustered and anxious. Who were you talking to? I asked. HR. There's some paperwork they need me to complete for the new benefits package. It was a lie. Our benefits had been updated months ago, and besides, it was after business hours. That weekend, I told Tara I was feeling well enough to take Benji to the playground. It wasn't entirely a ruse. I did want to spend time with my son, but I also needed space to think and plan. Benji was excited to have me back to normal activities. We threw a football back and forth while he told me about school and his friends. His innocence and trust made what I was dealing with even more painful. "Dad, are you and Mom okay?" he asked suddenly. "What do you mean, buddy?" "You've been acting weird lately, and Mom keeps having these long phone calls where she goes in her office and closes the door." Even a 10-year-old could sense that something was wrong. "We're fine," I assured him. "Just some grown-up stuff we're working through." But as I watched Benji play, I realized that whatever Tara was planning would affect him too. If she was setting up for a divorce, if she was manipulating our finances or our family situation, Benji would be caught in the middle. That evening, I made a decision. I was going to confront Maggie directly. Monday morning, I called Dr. Harman's office and asked to schedule a follow-up appointment. When the receptionist offered me a slot later in the week, I said I was experiencing some concerning symptoms and needed to be seen immediately. "Can you come in this afternoon at 3?" she asked. "I'll be there." I arrived early and waited in the parking lot until I saw Dr. Harman leave for what looked like a lunch break. Then I went inside and asked to speak with Maggie about my recovery concerns. The receptionist directed me to a small consultation room, and Maggie appeared a few minutes later looking nervous. "Mr. Rainer, what symptoms are you experiencing?" "I'm not here about symptoms," I said quietly. "I'm here about the envelope." Maggie's face went pale. She glanced toward the door, then sat down across from me. "I can't discuss—" "Maggie, I know about the $15,000. I know about the forged consent forms. I know Dr. Harman is being paid to participate in some kind of fraud." She stared at me for a long moment, then put her head in her hands. "I told him this was wrong," she whispered. "I told him we could lose our licenses. Then help me stop it." Maggie looked up, tears in her eyes. "Your wife. She approached Dr. Harman about 6 months ago. She said she needed documentation that you had voluntarily chosen sterilization. She offered him a lot of money to adjust the paperwork." "Adjust how?" "The consent form you signed was legitimate, but she wanted additional documents that made it look like the decision was entirely yours, that you had refused to consider her feelings about future children." My stomach turned. "Why?" "I don't know the details, but she mentioned something about needing proof for legal proceedings. Dr. Harman didn't ask too many questions. The money was too good." Maggie reached into her pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. "I recorded some of their conversations," she said. "I was scared about what we were getting involved in. I thought I might need protection if this all went wrong." She handed me the recorder. "There's a conversation from last week where your wife explains exactly what she plans to do with the documents." I pocketed the recorder. "Maggie, I'm going to need you to testify about what happened. Are you willing to do that?" She nodded slowly. "I never should have gone along with this. If it helps make things right, yes." That evening, I listened to the recording in my car, parked in a lot behind the grocery store. Tara's voice was clear and businesslike. "The divorce papers will cite reproductive coercion and abandonment. With the documentation showing he made a unilateral decision to get sterilized without consulting me, I should be able to claim emotional distress and breach of marital contract. My attorney says I can probably get 60% of assets plus enhanced alimony." Dr. Harman's response was equally chilling. "And the timing?" "I'll file next week. The longer I wait after his surgery, the less impact the emotional distress claim will have. I need to strike while it looks fresh and devastating." There was more. Discussions about how to present the case, which assets Tara wanted to prioritize, even speculation about how to minimize my custody time with Benji. I sat in that parking lot for an hour, listening to my wife coldly plan the destruction of our family and my financial future. Every detail had been calculated, from the timing of the vasectomy to the wording of the forged documents. But now I had evidence. Real, actionable evidence. The next day, I met with Lance again and played him the recording. His expression grew darker with each revelation. "This is conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and probably extortion," he said. "But Elliot, we need to be strategic about how we use this information." "What do you mean?" "If we confront her now, she'll just deny everything and claim the recording is fake. We need to catch her in the act of filing the fraudulent divorce papers." Lance pulled out a calendar. "According to the recording, she plans to file next week. That gives us time to prepare our counter-strategy." "What kind of counter-strategy?" "We're going to let her file. Then we're going to destroy her case so completely that she'll be facing criminal charges instead of a divorce settlement." Over the next few days, Lance and I prepared our evidence package. We had the photographs of the forged documents, the recording of Tara's conversation with Dr. Harman, bank records showing the fraudulent payments, and Maggie's sworn statement about the conspiracy. We also discovered something else. Tara had taken out a life insurance policy on me 6 months ago, with herself as the sole beneficiary. The policy included clauses about mental distress and family dissolution that would pay out substantial additional benefits in case of divorce. "She's been planning this for at least 6 months," Lance observed. "Every piece has been carefully positioned." "But now we have all the pieces too." Lance nodded grimly. "And we're going to use them." Friday afternoon, I received a call from Dr. Harman's office asking me to come in for an urgent follow-up appointment. "Is there a problem with my recovery?" I asked. "Dr. Harman just wants to review some paperwork with you," the receptionist said. "Can you come in Monday morning?" I agreed, but something about the call felt off. When I mentioned it to Lance, he immediately became suspicious. "They're probably trying to get you to sign additional documents," he said. "Or maybe Tara is getting nervous and wants to accelerate her timeline." "What should I do?" "Keep the appointment, but we're going to be ready for whatever they're planning." That weekend, Tara was unusually attentive. She made my favorite dinner, suggested we watch a movie together, even talked about planning a family vacation once I was fully recovered. "I've been thinking," she said as we sat on the couch Sunday night, "maybe we should renew our vows for our 15th anniversary next year. Really celebrate how far we've come as a couple." It was surreal, listening to her talk about our future together while knowing she was planning to destroy our marriage within days. "That sounds nice," I managed to say. She snuggled closer to me on the couch. "I know this whole vasectomy thing has been stressful, but I think it's going to bring us closer together. No more worrying about unplanned pregnancies, no more stress about family planning. We can just focus on us." I wondered if she felt any guilt about what she was planning, or if the deception had become so natural that she could lie without any emotional reaction at all. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I drove to Dr. Harman's office with a digital recorder in my pocket and Lance's phone number ready to dial at a moment's notice. Dr. Harman greeted me in his office, not the examination room. There were several documents spread across his desk. "Elliot, thank you for coming in. I wanted to review some final paperwork with you." He pushed a document across the desk. It was another consent form, this one even more detailed than the forged version I'd found in Tara's purse. "This is just a confirmation of the procedure we performed," Dr. Harman said smoothly, "for our records." I pretended to read through the document, but I was actually activating the recorder in my pocket. "Doctor, this language seems different from what I signed before the surgery. Just standard updates to our documentation process, nothing that changes the nature of what we discussed. But the document was clearly designed to further support Tara's claims about my unilateral decision-making. It included statements about my refusal to consider my wife's reproductive wishes and my insistence on permanent sterilization despite her objections. "I'm not comfortable signing this," I said. Dr. Harman's demeanor shifted slightly. "Mr. Rainer, your wife has been very clear about the importance of having complete documentation. I think it would be in everyone's best interest if you cooperated. Everyone's best interest? Your wife's legal situation requires certain clarifications about the circumstances of your procedure. There it was. Dr. Harman had just admitted on tape that the documents were being prepared for Tara's legal strategy. What legal situation? I asked. Dr. Harman realized he'd said too much. I think you should discuss that with your wife. I stood up. I think I'll discuss it with my attorney instead. That afternoon, Tara came home from work with a strange energy about her. She was nervous but excited, like someone about to take a big risk. "How did your appointment with Dr. Harman go?" she asked. "Fine, just routine follow-up stuff." She nodded, but I could see she was disappointed that I hadn't signed whatever document they'd prepared. "Elliot, I need to talk to you about something important." My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. "What's up?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our marriage, about our future. I think we need to have some serious conversations about whether we're still compatible." Here it comes, I thought. "What do you mean?" Tara sat down across from me, adopting the same patient tone she'd used when first suggesting the vasectomy. "I think we want different things. This whole vasectomy situation has made me realize that you make major decisions without really considering how they affect me." "Tara, the vasectomy was your idea." "Was it?" "Because I remember expressing concerns about having more children, and you immediately jumped to the most extreme solution. You didn't want to discuss other options, didn't want to consider how permanent sterilization might affect my feelings about our relationship." I stared at her, amazed by how smoothly she was rewriting history. "I think," she continued, "we should consider a trial separation. Some time apart to figure out what we both really want." "A separation?" "Just temporary, maybe 6 months. I could stay with Cynthia, give us both space to think clearly." But I knew from the recording that this wasn't about a trial separation. This was the setup for her divorce filing. "Let me think about it," I said. "Of course. But Elliot, I don't want this to drag out indefinitely. If we're going to make changes, we should do it sooner rather than later." That evening, Lance called with an update. "I've been monitoring the court filing system," he said. "No divorce papers yet, but I expect them any day now." She brought up separation tonight. I think she's positioning for the final move. Good. Let her file. The moment she submits those fraudulent documents to the court, we'll have her on multiple felony charges. What about Dr. Harman? Him too. Medical fraud, conspiracy, bribery. He's looking at serious prison time. Wednesday morning, I got a call from Benji's school. He was sick and needed to be picked up. When I arrived, the nurse mentioned that Tara had called earlier to say she wouldn't be available to pick him up due to an important appointment. An appointment that lasted all day, apparently. Tara didn't come home until after 6, and when she did, she looked both exhausted and relieved. "How's Benji feeling?" she asked. "Better. Just a stomach bug. Where were you all day?" "Work stuff, budget meetings." Another lie. I was starting to wonder if Tara was capable of telling the truth about anything anymore. Thursday morning, Lance called me at work. "It's done," he said. "She filed an hour ago. Divorce petition citing reproductive coercion, emotional abandonment, and breach of marital contract. She's asking for 60% of assets, enhanced alimony, and primary custody of Benji. And the forged documents? All submitted as evidence. She just committed multiple felonies in writing, with court stamps and everything." I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that we finally had everything we needed to stop her, sadness that my marriage was truly over. What's next? Now we spring the trap. I've already contacted the district attorney's office and the state medical board. They're very interested in our evidence package. How long before? The hospital administration wants to meet with all parties tomorrow afternoon. They're calling it a routine review of patient care concerns. but it's actually going to be a formal presentation of fraud charges. Friday morning, I received a call from Dr. Harman's office asking me to attend a meeting at the hospital that afternoon. "What kind of meeting?" I asked. "Just a routine review with the hospital administration. Dr. Harman will be there, along with your wife and some other staff members." I pretended to be confused about why Tara would be there, but I knew exactly what was happening. Lance had orchestrated this meeting as the venue for our final revelation. When I told Tara about the meeting, she seemed nervous but tried to hide it. "I wonder what that's about," she said. "Probably just standard follow-up stuff. Maybe they want to review their procedures or something. I'm sure it's nothing important." But the way she spent the morning checking and rechecking her phone suggested she knew exactly how important this meeting was going to be. At 2:00, I walked into the hospital administrator's boardroom with a red folder containing copies of all our evidence. Tara was already there, sitting next to Dr. Harman and looking confident. Maggie sat at the far end of the table, avoiding eye contact with the doctor. Dr. Kwan, the hospital administrator, called the meeting to order. "We're here to review some concerns that have been raised about patient care procedures," she began. "Mr. Rainer, I understand you have some questions about your recent surgery." I looked around the table, at Tara's expectant face, at Dr. Harman's smug confidence, at Maggie's obvious discomfort. "Yes," I said, opening my red folder. "I have several questions." "Dr. Kwan," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. 3 weeks ago, I underwent what I believed was a routine vasectomy. However, I've since discovered that the procedure was part of an elaborate fraud scheme involving my wife and Dr. Harman. Tara's face went white. "Elliot, what are you talking about?" I ignored her and continued addressing Dr. Kwan. "During my surgery, while I was under anesthesia, I overheard Dr. Harman instruct Nurse Doyle to give my wife a sealed envelope and specifically ensure that I didn't see it." Dr. Harman started to speak, but I held up my hand. The envelope contained forged medical consent forms, fraudulent documentation, and evidence of a $15,000 bribe paid to Dr. Harman by my wife. I placed the first set of documents on the table. These are photographs of the original forged consent form, which bears a falsified version of my signature and includes language I never agreed to. Dr. Kwan examined the documents, her expression growing more serious with each page. "Furthermore," I continued, "yesterday my wife filed for divorce using these fraudulent documents as evidence. She's claiming that I coerced her into agreeing to my sterilization and that I made unilateral reproductive decisions without her consent." Tara found her voice. "This is insane, Elliot. You're having some kind of breakdown." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and connected it to the conference room's audio system. "Because I have a recording of you explaining your entire plan to Dr. Harman." Tara's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "The divorce papers will cite reproductive coercion and abandonment. With the documentation showing he made a unilateral decision to get sterilized without consulting me, I should be able to claim emotional distress and breach of marital contract." The silence in the room was deafening. Dr. Harman's face had gone gray, and Tara looked like she was about to be sick. "The recording continues," I said, "with detailed discussions about asset division, custody arrangements, and insurance payouts. My wife has been planning this fraud for at least 6 months." I placed another set of documents on the table. "These are bank records showing the payments to Dr. Harman, including the $15,000 bribe for his participation in creating fraudulent medical documentation." Dr. Kwan turned to Dr. Harman. "Doctor, is this true?" Dr. Harman's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Maggie spoke up from the end of the table. "Dr. Kwan, I have a sworn statement detailing my involvement in this situation. Mrs. Rainer approached Dr. Harman 6 months ago with this plan. I recorded several of their conversations because I was concerned about the legal implications." I pulled out the final set of documents. These are copies of the fraudulent divorce papers my wife filed yesterday, using the forged medical documents as evidence. By submitting false evidence to the court, she's committed perjury and fraud. Dr. Kwan stood up, her face flushed with anger. Dr. Harman, you are suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the building. She turned to Tara. Mrs. Rainer, I'm calling the police. You'll be arrested for fraud, bribery, and perjury. Tara finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate plea. You don't understand. I needed that money. I needed security. Elliot would never have agreed to a divorce otherwise. So you decided to sterilize him without his knowledge and frame him for reproductive coercion? Dr. Kwan's voice was ice cold. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone, Tara whispered. It was just supposed to give me options. I stood up, closing my red folder. The only option you've given yourself is a prison sentence. Dr. Kwan picked up her phone. Security, please come to conference room A immediately. And call the police. We have multiple felonies to report. As we waited for security to arrive, Tara turned to me with tears in her eyes. Elliot, please. Think about Benji. Think about our family. I am thinking about Benji, I replied. I'm thinking about raising him to understand that actions have consequences, that fraud and manipulation aren't acceptable, and that he deserves better than a mother who would destroy his family for money. 2 security guards entered the room, followed by a police officer. Dr. Kwan handed over our evidence package and gave a brief summary of the situation. Dr. Harman and Mrs. Rainer need to be taken into custody, she concluded. As the police officer began reading Tara her rights, she looked at me one last time. How long have you known? Since the day of the surgery. You should have been more careful about your whispered conversations. Dr. Harman was led away first, his medical career over, his reputation destroyed. Tara followed, still crying, still trying to explain why her fraud was somehow justified. As the conference room emptied, Dr. Kwan turned to me. Mr. Rainer, I want to personally apologize for what happened in our facility. This is the most serious breach of medical ethics I've encountered in 20 years of hospital administration. Thank you, Dr. Kwan.